In 1988, George H.W. Bush, who had been Ronald Reagan's vice president, is going to run against Democrat Walter Mondale and the first female vice presidential candidate, Geraldine Ferraro. He wins this election mostly because he had a very strong foreign policy background and a lot of experience that he gained from being a former CIA director as well as a former vice president. He campaigns with the slogan, "Read my lips, no new taxes." Unfortunately, because the economy was not doing well, it forces him to do the very thing he didn't want to do, which was raise taxes. This goes directly against his campaign promises. Due to all of the turmoil, we do see gridlock appear in the government. This means our government was not working well together, specifically the president and Congress. We see a major turn in the Cold War. The Soviets began withdrawing their troops from various regions in the late 1980s. Democracy movements began popping up all over Europe. And instead of the Soviet Union coming in and brutally oppressing them, instead they were allowed to go on. Finally, in November of 1989, the Berlin Wall is destroyed. This was the wall that was built by the Soviets in the 1960s so that they could control East Germany. Finally, after the wall comes down, Germany is reunited. This was a major sign that the Soviet system was beginning to decline. Yugoslavia also begins to break apart, and fighting there begins as well in an attempt to establish some democracy. China even experiences some democratic protest. However, they don't handle it the way that the Soviet Union did. In 1989, at a place called Tiananmen Square, a group of Chinese students who were peaceful protesters were protesting for democracy. The Chinese government comes in and brutally puts this protest down. You see here in this picture, they roll in tanks to deal with these peaceful protesters. And they basically open fire into this group of unarmed students. The United States will eventually be left as the lone superpower. Mikhail Gorbachev, who comes to power of the Soviet Union in 1985, is going to come in when the Soviet Union was having a lot of problems. Specifically, their economy was not doing well at all. He begins several policies that are going to change the Soviet Union and to begin to lead them down a path where the Soviet system or communism would fall in that country. Glasnost is the first one. This means openness. Where the Soviet Union had been such a closed society for so many years, he begins to open it to make it more public. Perestroika was the second policy. This means the restructuring of the government and the economy of the Soviet Union. He begins making those major changes in the Soviet Union. In 1991, a coup was attempted, leaving Boris Yeltsin as the leader of that country. Finally, in the early 90s, the 14 republics of the Soviet Union, or United Soviet Socialist Republics, begins to separate. When this happens, the United States is very concerned about the nuclear weapons that the Soviet Union had held for all those years. The questions being asked were, where are all of these weapons going? We were particularly concerned that these weapons might end up in the hands of some very dangerous countries who might be willing to use them very irresponsibly. The United States sees itself involved in the Middle East once again. In George H.W. Bush's presidency, Iraq invaded Kuwait in a play to control their oil. Under the leadership of Saddam Hussein, he ordered them to invade and attempt to take over the country of Kuwait. In what becomes known as Operation Desert Shield or Operation Desert Storm, which most people know it as, we were attempting to push Iraq out of Kuwait. This war was over very quickly, and the United States and the UN was very successful in again protecting Kuwait and pushing Iraq out of that country under the direction of generals like Colin Powell and Norman Schwarzkopf. Because of this very successful war, President George H.W. Bush sees some of the highest approval ratings in history. It was very successful. Basically, the Iraqi soldiers basically laid their weapons down when they saw the Americans coming. And we had very few casualties in this war, which again made this very successful. Unfortunately, in 1992, the United States economy enters a recession. Remember, a recession means our economy is not doing well. When that happens, anytime the economy is not doing well, the American people immediately look to the president and blame the president. This is going to make him very unpopular and lead to some of the problems in the 1992 election.